Greetings, everyone. Dr. Brian Scott here with you this morning. This is a cold, wintry morning here in Southern Ontario where I'm located, but I want to welcome you to a hot session today of our Insight to the End Times. We're going to have a great time in the Word today. We've been studying over the last almost 4 full years now the prophetic scriptures in the Bible as to where we might be on God's timetable as we approach the end of the age. And every year, as we cross over into a new year, January the 1st, as we just recently did, we're getting closer and closer to the end when all of the things that the Bible has prophesied are going to take place. How close are we? I can't give you an exact number, but I can tell you we're very close. And that comes from the scriptures and from the events that are occurring in our everyday world. Things are getting really, really weird out there. So we have, over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 podcasts, been looking at this new year, and we've been looking at whether there's a lot of good in it or a lot of evil in it, because evil is a sign of the very end, obviously. And we're finding there's a lot of stuff going on that's weird, really weird. I want to read some verses to you. We've read them before. It always is good to repeat them. In the prophetic book in the Old Testament by Joel, the minor prophet, he says in chapter 2, the first 2 verses, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm in my holy mountain. For the day of the Lord is coming, for it is at hand." Verse 2, verse 2, "A day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness." Well, that's where we are today. We are living in that time frame today. And Isaiah 60, a major prophet, he said in chapter 60 of his book, Isaiah 60 verses 1 and 2, he said, verse 2 particularly, he said, "In these last days, there's going to be darkness over the land and gross darkness over the people." And then he went on to say, "But the glory of the Lord is going to shine brighter and brighter and brighter." So who's it going to shine brighter on and through? Well, the born-again Christian believer, obviously. And so that's your assignment. That's my assignment. We're to bring the good news of the gospel to this world because there's darkness and gross darkness everywhere. Now, the Apostle Paul, I'm in the book of 2 Timothy right now. The Apostle Paul wrote young Timothy. He was the pastor of the church in Ephesus. And Paul wrote him and said in chapter 3 of the second book, 2 Timothy chapter 3, he said, "In the last days, perilous times are going to come." Oh yeah, perilous times are going to come.
Hey, this is Matt from Insights to the End Times. I wanted to interrupt just for a quick moment and ask you to do us a huge favor. If you could go ahead and hit the like, share, or subscribe button, it would allow us to make sure that you stay up to date with all the latest videos from Dr. Scott. Now back to the episode.
And that means extremely dangerous times. So let me read a couple of verses to you just to emphasize what it means, perilous times, what that means. This is out of the Amplified Bible. He says, "In these last days will come perilous times of great stress and trouble, which will be hard to deal with and hard to bear." Verse 2, "People will be lovers of self and utterly self-centered." Wow, is that accurate or is that accurate? Yes, it's right on the money. Secondly, they'll be lovers of money, and they will be aroused by an inordinate, greedy desire for wealth. No, we see that everywhere we turn, and we see more wealth in the world now in the hands of very few people than we've ever seen before. Like, we're talking so many zeros behind the number that you can't even comprehend it. Thirdly, they'll be proud and arrogant, contemptuous boasters. They'll be abusive, blasphemous, scoffing. They'll be disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, and profane. It's almost as if I'm reading the newspaper when you look at this. Now, on our phones, I'm sure you got one of these cell phones, you know, the smartphones. When I go on the app for news and it comes up, there are sections of this news feed that are absolutely right on the money right here. They are unholy, they're profane, they're just horrible, really, when you think about it. Here's verse 3. These people will be without natural human affection. They'll be callous and inhuman. They'll be relentless. They will admit of no truth or appeasement. They'll be slanderers. They'll be false accusers. They'll be troublemakers. They'll be intemperate. They'll be loose in their morals and conduct, uncontrolled and fierce, haters of good. Now, if you're not aware of this being the weekly news, daily news, hourly news, you must be hiding out in a cave somewhere, because this is going on constantly and being praised and worshiped as progressive, as the elite, and so on and so forth. Here's verse 4. They'll be treacherous. They'll be betrayers and rash and inflated with self-conceit. They're going to be lovers of sensual pleasures and vain amusements more than and rather than lovers of God. Now, that's where we're living today. So the title of this message or this podcast today is, we're in 2026. Is it going to be more good or more evil? And what I want you to see is that there are no restraints anymore on what we call evil. There are no restraints whatsoever. I'm in my 70s now. I know I don't look it. Yes, hallelujah. But listen, in the 7.5 decades that I've lived, I've never seen such a movement away from standards that we used to follow as being accurate and so on and so forth. I'm what they call a baby boomer. And folks, things have just been going downhill so quickly in terms of morals, ethics, standards, and so on and so forth. I'm going to give you some examples today because these are extreme examples. And why am I doing this? Why am I sharing this with you? Simply because most people are not paying attention. They're disregarding what's going on because it's bad news. So don't tell me. I don't want to know. In my little circle that I live in, I'm fine. Nothing's going on that bothers me. And as far as I'm concerned, everybody makes their own decisions. It's not up to me to share anything with anybody. It's up to them. That's not what the Bible says. We're to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So that's not what the Bible's telling us to do. Let me give you some examples of darkness and gross darkness that has come over the land. Here in Canada, we have had some changes that have come into existence through our governments and programs and their legislation called MAID, M-A-I-D. It's medical assistance in dying. It's a pretty fancy term for what we would otherwise call euthanasia. And when it came into existence here in Canada in 2016, there were a couple of other countries in the world that were already practicing it. And our country got involved. And when it first came into existence, there were 4 prerequisites for it to be applied. First of all, the person had to be over 18 years of age. Secondly, they had to be deemed competent. They could make a decision. Thirdly, they had to be suffering from a severe, grievous, and irremediable medical condition. In the medical field, it could not be solved. And fourthly, they had to give informed consent to be part of the MAID program. Once that was all done and the forms were signed, then there would be a drug administered to them, and they would just simply pass over into death. So that was brand new. That was huge, brand new. Back in 2016, that's roughly 9.5 years ago. Last year in 2024, the statistics just released showed that 16,499 Canadians chose MAID, and and left this earth. 16,500 people in 2024. Now, on a percentage basis of our overall population, that was just over 5%. It happens to be the highest percentage of the population of any other country in the world. So Canada has risen to a leading position in this. Isn't that something to be proud of? I also read a statistic that since 2016, we've now seen about 75,000 people choose MAID. Now, when we go into our hospitals here, this may not occur across the board, but I've heard it has occurred on a number of occasions where if you're a senior and you have a condition that's serious, they will have you sign a form to administer MAID to you. So you have to say no to it. And some people have been so incensed by this form and this intention that, hey, we would sign and allow you to administer the program, the death program to us. They got up, got dressed, and got out of the hospital completely. Now, here's where we're really going with this. This is where the darkness comes in even more so than it was before. But they are looking here in Canada to extend the MAID program to those who are suffering a mental illness or are suffering homelessness or are suffering poverty, and they don't want to live with the mental pressure or with the homeless situation or with the fact that they are tired of being poverty-stricken. And they're also looking at lowering the age. Now, some of these events are going to take effect in 2027. That's only 12 months away. The point I'm getting at is, folks, this is getting out of control. And this is where I would suggest to you, from my perspective, that this is a gross darkness that's coming on the land. This is amazing. Now, let me share some other thoughts with you. We've got other situations occurring in our land, as well as in other lands around the world, but I'm speaking primarily from my perspective here in Canada and what I can see and hear and read about the United States, in North America, in other words. And we've got a lot of things occurring where decisions, court decisions, government decisions, policy decisions are being made to move God out of the equation and replace God's position with man's position. So technology is one of the main culprits of this. And as the technology continues to improve with the artificial intelligence and with cognitive learning and with machine learning and so on and so forth, we're getting to a place where the technology is thinking for us, making decisions for us without us even knowing that. Here's another area. I've seen this technology thing quite frequently. I'm sure you have too. I'm a note taker. I always have been. I came from my background as a lawyer, so I've got notes that I work from. And when I'm preparing my notes and I'm working on the keyboard, there's a lot of times it's already putting a sentence in place before I've even typed it or spoken it, because it knows the sequence of events that I would likely say. So there are words that all of a sudden show up. They're usually in context, but it's not, I want control of that. You should want control of that. Here's another area. Our public schools here, not only in Canada, but in the United States, in the North American context, we could almost say that they're turning into devil camps. Now, that's a pretty strong statement, I realize that. But it sources from a number of things. First of all, the society and culture and what we call the woke movement, which features an emphasis on diversification, inclusivity, and equality. It's coming on the scene such that things are shifting and changing in the program. So the way things are being taught and what's being taught is being shifted to agree with these standards. And where you find the most noise coming is from the outside percentages, I would call it, where you have other like the transgender type of movement, that type of thing. You've got maybe a small percentage of people who feel that they have the right to impose their standards on everybody else. But everybody else doesn't have the right to impose their standards on this small group. So we have schools who are teaching things that are so contrary to our culture and our society, but they call it progressive and accurate, and it's where things are today. Not necessarily so. And there's just so many things occurring that, kids are going to school, teenagers in what we call high school, secondary school, and when they arrive at school, they then announce that today I identify as, and they change the direction. So some of them come to school saying, I identify as a cat or a dog. And in between classes, when they're in the halls going from one room to another, they're on all fours. That's pretty awkward for a human being to be operating as if they're a cat or a dog. But then their parents are calling the school saying, my child is identifying as a cat. I don't want to hurt their self-esteem or their self-values or self-worth. So please put a litter box in the washroom for them to use. I don't know. I don't know how you view that, but I view that as complete bunkers, like really. And on it goes. So we have kids coming and they don't want to be referred to as he or she. They want to be referred to by other names or other pronouns. They don't want to be referred to as John. They want to be referred to as Julia. And on it goes. And the teachers are not allowed to tell the parents. And the parents are not allowed to have any input. So this goes on. I'm just scratching the surface on the mess that is occurring in our school systems. And we have just experienced in the last 10 days here in my location, news reports of teachers, for instance, going into the school libraries and deciding that all these books are dangerous to children, to teenagers. And in one of our local schools, they had a library, a beautiful library, in a comprehensive library of over 18,000 books in the library, many of which were historical books and historical records. And they decided that we don't want those historical records because they may skew a child's direction in learning. So they got rid of 10,000 books. That's over 50% of the books in the library. Then it was reported a few days later there was another school in a different district who did the same thing. And so now that's under consider. Like, what is going on? What is going on? We've got what I call reprobate minds in leadership positions across every kind of category. And they come up with ideas that they think are progressive and they are current and they are meeting social and cultural needs and so on, but they are so far away from standards that we have set. So delusion has become massive in our society today. People believe lies. And here's the way it used to be when I studied in law school. You were considered to be innocent until they could prove you to be guilty. That has shifted in 180 degrees, and now you're considered to be guilty until you can prove your innocence. And what you're being charged with many times will be lies, false accusations, as we read in Timothy, false accusations and lies and slander and so on. And you have to unprove that. And all the other side who's accusing you has to say is, so-and-so did this or said this, or whatever, and then you're on the hook to undo that. Well, if it was the other way around, the standard would be far harder to meet, and people would be protected far more. Not so today. So what are we doing? What are we talking about? We're talking about being on the edge of perilous times. Right in the middle of it, really. Perilous times. And historical records would indicate to us some of those perilous times resulted in a movement called Marxism, which leads to a system called communism. And those are horrible places to be. And yet it seems more and more that we are heading there because of the tail wagging the dog. Now, you may or may not agree with everything I said. I understand that. But at the very least, I would ask you to open your thinking, your eyes, pay a little more attention. And if you want a standard as to how to gauge things, this book called the Bible sets a pretty good standard. And you'll find that a lot of what's going on today does not meet the standards of this word. So I'll be back on Wednesday, and I'm going to give you some things on Wednesday that will really, really help you. And I look forward to seeing you then. I call you blessed. Thanks for joining us today. Amen.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Insights to the End Times. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like to get notified every time we release a new video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right over here. Now, if you'd like to catch the previous episode, you can do that right here, or the entire playlist is right above right here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Insights to the End Times.